Hello there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fantasy for the Ages, the show where a father and son sit down and talk about fantasy and sci fi, literature and media that we enjoy, and whatever else the conversation takes us to. Today, I'm here with you to kick off Book 5 of The Wheel of Time, The Fires of Heaven. Sadly, there's been a last minute curveball. Just minutes before we went live, Zach let me know he was not feeling very well. Nauseous. Nausea and content creating do not go well together. So he's not with us for this episode today. This is the first Wheel of Time focused episode that we've done here that's going to be just me. But the show must go on. We have a schedule to keep. So I'm going to try to represent, and we'll see what happens. This is a pretty significant episode as we start off book 5. I've got all the notes that Zach and I were going to share together. I'll try to soldier on his behalf. If you enjoy what you see today, and I hope you will, subscribe to our channel, like this episode, put some comments down there for us to see, give us some feedback, and certainly look for the other ways in our show notes that you can interact with us. Discord, Twitter. Twitter might not be around much longer, who knows? So we're also on Mastodon, a new up and coming social media platform. Having a lot of fun on that right now. We're also kind of on Facebook, and we're definitely on Instagram for our drink recipes. I'll talk more about that in a moment. Now I'd want to check in with my son, but he's not here. You already know how he's doing, but I'll tell you, I'm doing well today. And I hope you are also, and that this episode helps you do even better. I am drinking today because, of course, when we do an episode, we imbibe. And in fact, that'll probably be important today that I take the occasional pause to have a sip. Because I'm going to be doing a lot of talking here today now. What am I drinking? Well, we had a recent vacation to New Orleans, and I took some classes on how to make real cocktails. So I've been doing cocktails, creating wattails for a couple of years now on this channel, but now I've got some schooling to go with it. So what I have crafted for you today is what I'm going to call the old-fashioned Fires of Heaven. Okay, that's a lame name. I copped out here today. I've made myself my first old-fashioned here at home, and I couldn't think of a good Wheel of Time name. So I'll be honest, it's just an old-fashioned. But literally, it's a sugar cube with Angostura bitters that have been all, mulled and stirred up, a couple splashes of water, and then a bunch of bourbon. And that's what an old-fashioned tastes like. I didn't have any fancy garnishes to put on, and my bourbon wasn't the highest quality. I'm working to upgrade the bar. But it'll do. It'll do. All right, let's move into some notes here. As always, I want to remind you, when we do these Wheel of Time content episodes, these are spoiler light. So if you've read through the first 4 books of the Wheel of Time, and now you're moving into the Fires of Heaven, this is a safe space for you. I'm going to talk about today the prologue in chapter 1. I'm going to full spoil these chapters, but nothing beyond it. So this is a great companion as you're reading through for the first time. But if you are a longtime friend of the Wheel of Time, you should enjoy what we talk about here today as well. Give your thoughts on what I put out here, my take on the content. If you agree, if you disagree, if you have more insights you've come across that you want to add to it. It's always nice that if you do comment out here where everyone can see it, that you also kind of keep it spoiler light to protect our first-time readers. A few other notes before I jump into the actual prologue. I mentioned our new social media presence, Mastodon. I do want you to look for us there. We're still at Fantasy for the Ages, and then there's some extra stuff you got to put at the end. It's listed down in the show notes, so you can find us. A lot of the same things we've done on Twitter for a long time, you'll now find on Mastodon. But you won't find the ads, you won't find a lot of negativity, you won't find Elon Musk and Donald Trump. So if you're wanting a different kind of space, Mastodon appears to be the place for you. It is definitely helping us spread the word of our show to a new audience. We've picked up some new subscribers both on YouTube and on our audio format just recently. And YouTube is really taking off right now because I've been having fun with the shorts and our Tiny Talk episodes. They're getting a lot of views. In fact, over the last month, we've passed 1,400 views. That's right, 1,400. That's small potatoes for some major content creators, but that's a new high for us, and we're excited. If you're amongst those views, of course, and if you're watching this, you are, thank you so much, and I hope you're having fun with what we're putting out there. Connected to new subscribers, we actually got a real email yesterday. Yeah, fantasyfortheages@gmail.com. We've had it for 2 years and we've gotten maybe, I don't know, 10 emails over that time. People they just don't use email for fandom stuff so much anymore. But this was great. It was a deeper response to something I posted on Mastodon about a series I'm reading. So nice, and thank you for your email. Speaking of what I'm reading, I am working my way through The Faithful and the Fallen right now by John Gwynne. I'm about 2/3 the way, maybe 3/4 of the way now through book 3, Ruin, where I sense it's about to ruin me. There's some hard things I think that happen at the very end portion of this book. It's been hinted. I can see it coming. I'm waiting for the shoe to drop. But I'm loving the series. I'm also, of course, still reading through The Dragon Riders of Pern as part of our Discord Pern Book Club. You can jump in with us at any time if you want. We have just started our 7th book in the 26-book Pern series, Merida, Dragon Rider of Pern, or Dragon Lady of Pern. Dragon Lady has a different meaning sometimes, but that's not what this one is about. So, Merida, Dragon Lady of Pern. Check it out. It's a great book. And feel free to jump into our Discord and converse with us about it. I am also reading, The Fires of Heaven, but that doesn't count. But there is a third thing I'm reading. I'm still working through Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman's The Deathgate Cycle. Now, I've been reading this for quite a while, I think a few months now, because there's 7 books and I've been fitting them in between other things. I'm almost done with book 5 now, The Hand of Chaos, where the tension and action of the overall series is definitely reaching new highs, and I look forward to book 6 and 7, but I will be squeezing other things in between each of those books. All right, last thing to say today before I get onto the prologue. I want to welcome some of those new subscribers, people who are watching now today or listening on audio that are fairly new to our content. Now, if you went back and started at the beginning, you won't hear this for a long time, but I just want to give a shout out to all of our new listeners in the Czech Republic, Czechia, and in Thailand. And in Czechia, we're actually trending really well right now. So thank you. And of course, we love all of you from the US and the UK and New Zealand and Australia. A lot of people who've been with us all along and enjoying our content. We hope you will keep enjoying it. All right, that's it for the notes. Let's talk Wheel of Time. I'm super excited to begin today this new book, The Fires of Heaven. Unlike our previous book, The Shadow Rising, but like all the other books in the series, this one does begin with a prologue. And the prologue actually has a title, The First Sparks Fall. As you may recall, in The Shadow Rising, Elida Sedai led a coup in the White Tower, and we begin the prologue with her living the life. She's now the Amerlin seat in the White Tower, although she has found at this point that the power of the Amerlin hasn't been all that she expected. Case in point, she's sitting here in the Amerlin study with representatives of the various Ajas supposedly meeting to report to her and help advise her on making decisions on handling various things happening around the world. But in reality, they're talking amongst themselves. They're barely looking at her. They're seemingly discussing and deciding on the matters all for themselves. They clearly don't truly respect her authority as the Amerlin. And there's a reason for that. They put her in position. They really look at her and they're like, yeah, okay, you're the Amerlin, but we made you the Amerlin. We're kind of equals of you. We represent our various Ajas, and we don't really have to answer to your authority because you're nobody except that we made you. You didn't earn it. Okay, this coup, was kind of a shady thing, a power play. We're learning here Elida really wasn't the one running forward and ruling it all. It was a coalition that she was nominally the lead of. So she's nominally the Amerlin. At least that's how they're treating her. From the chatter amongst these women, Robert Jordan does drop some relevant tidbits of news from around the world that astute readers should take note of. Let me point some of these out then. There are rumors of fighting in Shinar between Shinarans. I mean, there's always fighting up in Shinar. It's a borderland, and they're fighting off the Trollocs and other Shadow Spawn. But no, groups of Shinarans are battling against each other. There might be a civil war brewing. The Blight and the Borderlands are unusually quiet. So if there is a civil war in Shinar, they picked a good time because there's nothing else to do. Maybe they're just a little restless because there's not much sign of Shadow Spawn right now. Elsewhere on the Borderlands, much farther west, we've got the nation of Saldea. And the Marshal General of Saldea is marching away from the Blight with an army heading to the southeast. So where? Well, in general, that might mean they're marching towards Andor or the White Tower. Kind of hard to know exactly where they're headed. And keep in mind, there's no GPS, there's no phone or email. So these are rumors and general information that makes its way to the White Tower. But as they hear of this army leaving the borderlands that they should be protecting and coming this way, potentially, they're like, so what's that about? And their assumption is that Queen Zenobia, I have Queen Zenobia. That is wrong. It's Queen Tenobia. Anyway, she sent her general, Davram Bashir. That name is correct, I'm quite sure. They're assuming she sent him south because they've heard the news that Mazrim Taim has escaped. Who's that again? That was that false dragon who's been around since the very first book, The Eye of the World, but who had been conquered and captured by Aes Sedai and was being brought to the White Tower when somehow he escaped. He broke out, and the Aes Sedai have been on the hunt for him again. Why is this particularly relevant to the Saldeans? Well, he did a lot of harm there because he's actually Saldean. That's where Taim was. That's where he tried his stuff. That's where he was eventually captured and taken from on the way to the White Tower. So it's logical that they'd want him back, recaptured. We learn that the Aes Sedai are still working to try to find out what happened and recapture him, but there's no sign of Taim. Rumor has come out from the west that the Panak Amathera of Terabon has disappeared. If you've been with us for these episodes on the Shadow Rising, you know exactly what happened to her. But rumor has finally reached the White Tower. She's gone. Nobody knows where she is. But there is also rumor that Aes Sedai may have been involved in whatever happened to her. If only they knew. They have no news of Elaine, the daughter heir of Andor. So that's another topic of discussion. And they certainly want to know where she is because they've already had previous tension with Queen Morghese of Andor over where her daughter was when she disappeared previously. And now she's gone again. They also don't know where Galad is, the half brother of Elaine. And my mind is just racking now. See, if Zach was here, I'd ask him. I think it's half brother, might be stepbrother. Just having a brain freeze on that, and I'm not going to hold you hostage while I look it up. But Galad is missing. Where did Galad go? Why is he missing? Well, he's been disappeared. Not that they disappeared him, but ever since the uprising in the White Tower, no one has seen Galad. He's gone. He was here training alongside Gawain. Now, Gawain is still here. He's another thing they talk about because Gawain is the head of the younglings, the group of training, like warders in training, who rose up on behalf of Elida and the official powers of the White Tower when the coup took place. And they're still around. But the younglings, they completely look to Gawain. And he's kind of doing as he sees fit, including spending a lot of time off of the island of Tarvalon, having skirmishes with the White Cloaks who are still in the area. He's, I don't know, has an issue with his conscience, maybe. He's not totally in sync with Elida and with the current ruling Aes Sedai, and yet he has some honor that's keeping him nearby. So they have kind of a little discussion of what do we do about them, and we're not quite sure yet. Couple other little tidbits. Speaking of Elaine, Galad, and Gawain, they all come from Andor, where, again, Queen Morghese is ruling, and they've had their issues with her. So one of those issues was Queen Morghese dismissed her advisor, her Aes Sedai advisor. Elida had been that originally, and then they tried to put someone else there who was now kicked out, and she wants nothing to do with the tower. Well, that's the country that's right up against Tarvalon, and they've been in sync for a long time. So they need to try to keep tabs on what's happening there in Andor. So they've sent a red sister to Camelin to observe activities, what Queen Morghese is up to. She is newly raised, so she won't stick out. Now, what does that mean? Well, we learn and we get confirmation here that when you are raised to full sister and you swear on the oath rod, you don't suddenly have the face transformation where people can look at you and instantly know you're Aes Sedai. Apparently, that's something that occurs gradually after you've sworn your oath, because since she's newly raised, she doesn't look like an Aes Sedai. That's very helpful. It also helps make sense then a little bit of how we know Nynaeve, Egwene, and Elaine have been passing as full Aes Sedai when they don't have that look either. You don't instantly look that way when you're a young Aes Sedai. So this red sister is able to blend in Camelin. She doesn't stick out. She's not identifying herself as an Aes Sedai. Basically, she is spying. And she has access to the power to help her out. What is she learning? What messages is she sending back? Well, apparently Queen Morghese is busily making a claim on the throne of Cairhien. Now, by blood and marriage, she has some ties there. It's more by marriage, but she's trying to move in. They've had that civil war going on there. She's like, we could step in and reestablish order, and I believe I have a right to claim the Sun Throne. That hasn't worked out yet, but that's where her attention is focused, aside from the focus she has for her new lover. That's the other word being sent on, that she's quite occupied with this Lord Gabriel, who's by her side and really being the one also helping guide her decisions, like encouraging her to move in on Cairhien. All right, that's really what we know. All these little things that they spend time talking about, and in none of these do they turn to Elida and say, so, Mother, the term for the Amerlin, what would you advise, or what would you have us do? They seem pretty content working these things out amongst themselves. And Elida is sitting there stewing. It's like, how dare they? I'm the Amerlin seat. Who are these women? These are the ones that have kind of been appointed by the various Ajas to spend time advising Elida, but really they're trying to just run everything themselves by committee. So we have a number of them named. Most of them, actually. Danelle, a brown Aja, a brown sister. Alviarin, a former white, but technically she's not white Aja anymore because she's now the keeper of the Chronicles, the position formerly held by Liana Sedai. It's noted here that the keeper usually comes from the same Aja as the Amerlin. So in the previous case, Swan Sanche was blue Aja, so was Liana. Okay, but not here. Why not? Well, we're going to find out in just a little bit. We've got Teslin, a red sister, Jolene, a green sister, Shamarin, a yellow sister, Javindra, another red, Avanaline, a gray, Andaya, another gray, and then two other red sisters who are clearly not important enough because they never get named. I don't know. It's like Star Trek. They're the ones that are going to die. Spoiler light, I will point out that whenever Robert Jordan gives people names, it means he has a backstory for each of these people. He is very intentional on how he named them. If you've bought the book Origins of the Wheel of Time, you know a lot about a lot of these names already and where they come from. But you also know Jordan is very deliberate in the names he chooses for people. They have meaning. Don't read that book until you've read all of the Wheel of Time, though it's full of spoilers. I'll also mention, spoiler light, many of these people you're going to hear again. A few of them you'd already heard of before. For instance, Alviarin. A couple of these, this is their moment in the sun. I'm not going to tell you which is which, but you'll hear many of them again. I do want to point out there's a missing Aja. Did you catch it? Yeah, there's no blue. Why not? Well, the Amerlin who was torn down from power, Swan Sanche, came from the blue. No blue sisters were included in the plans to tear her down. None of them were there in the hall when they voted. It was all ramrod past the blue Aja. The blue has made itself scarce. There's no blue sisters here in the White Tower. They're all gone. Which is a point of contention and concern for Elida. So, as the women have finished up their business and they actually all start to rise, they're going to leave now, Elida makes her move. Have I given you leave to go, daughters? And she plays the boss card. She specifically uses turns of phrase that emphasize her authority as the Amerlin seat. She is in charge, is what she's saying. She's totally playing level 1 leadership. It's just position. I'm the Amerlin. And so what does she do here? She asks for news of the search for that woman and her companions. She won't even name the woman. And the rest of the sisters, they didn't even want to talk about it. We're talking about Swan Sanche, of course, because she escaped and took Liana with her. Where are they? Also missing at the same time is Logain. Now, it's ridiculous to think they'd be together, but are they? Where are they all? Asking for that news, all she receives is excuses, and she turns on Jolene, the green sister who is actually in charge of the search for them. And she says, perhaps you need a daily penance to help teach you the importance of prioritizing what you're supposed to do versus what you think you ought to talk about. Slap. But she's devious in how she assigns his penance. I mean, ouch. She charges Jolene to determine her own penance, a daily punishment, but warns her that if it's not severe enough, Elida will triple it. Ow! So you're trying to think of something appropriate, unpleasant, and unpleasant enough that Elida will accept it. And if it's just really nasty and harsh, but Elida decides it's not good enough, you're going to have that nasty, harsh thing tripled. What an awful thing to do to her. And all she can say is, yes, mother. Elida also asks for a report on the efforts to bring back the women who fled from the tower. Again, we're mostly talking about the Blue Sisters. There are others who left, are uncomfortable with what happened, and then there's yet more sisters out there in the world who should be coming back and have not. They're staying away. She wants to know what's been done. What can you tell us about that? And again, she gets excuses. And now one of them raises the issue specifically. It's kind of tricky working through these things because of information we've allowed to be out there, specifically rumors that we've done nothing to squash. What rumors? Well, going back to the missing women, the escapees, rumor is that Swan Sanche was stilled and executed. So how can you be searching for her? You haven't denied she's been executed. So they're trying to search without admitting she got away. That's awkward. Same thing as we try to find out where the sisters who have fled are, because the tower has not officially acknowledged that any sisters fled or that there was any civil chaos and a coup. There's just been a transition of power. And of course, it was done all as stately and orderly as Aes Sedai always do things. That's the official story. The sisters aren't lying. They're just not saying what really happened. And to try to seek out where these sisters are is kind of tricky when you don't want to admit the truth. That kind of has corollaries in modern politics. So it's tough to talk about certain things that you don't want to admit. Again, Elida, she's frustrated with these excuses. She doesn't want to hear about these things. She wants answers. And because she's got two major priorities, all these little things they talked about in Shannara and Saldaea and Terabon, irrelevant to Elida, because they don't play into the two primary issues. One, Elida must solidify her authority, her power as the Amerlin seat, because the White Tower needs strong leadership at this time. She believes that to her bones. Second, it goes hand in hand with it, the White Tower as an institution must be whole and strong. We cannot have division. We cannot have separateness. We must be united. Why? Well, this goes to the greater overarching matter that Elida is consumed with. Rand al'Thor. They have acknowledged as a tower that Rand al'Thor is the Dragon Reborn. The proof is there. In fact, that's part of how Swan Sanche was pulled down, because she knew about Rand al'Thor. She'd known about it for months and did not share it with other people. She and Moraine kept a secret. And that's unforgivable, because what's the deal with the Dragon Reborn? Well, the prophecies make it clear he must be at the last battle to face the Dark One. And in that, the prophecies talk about how he will shed his blood on the rocks of Sheol Ghul for the good of the world. Okay, so if he has to be there to face the Dark One, the White Tower needs to get control of him and protect him so that he survives until the last battle. I mean, if he's off doing whatever he does as a male channeler, all sorts of bad things could happen. He could be killed. He could go mad. Who knows? They're the only ones who can make sure that he's still around for the last battle. That's what Elida believes. That's what many of the Aes Sedai agree with her on. Additionally, thinking about that prophecy, this would mean that this Dragon Reborn, is going to need to go and die at the last battle. And Elida has a very low opinion of men. What man would willingly go to his death? He has nothing to gain from that. So they need him in their power so they can make sure he goes to his death. Oh, that's really charitable. Thanks, Elida. But she has no faith that he would do the right thing on his own. I would say, with all of this in my thoughts and laid out here, Elida doesn't understand how prophecy works. I know Swan and Moraine had struggled with this too. All these prophecies he needed to fulfill, and they decided to let him go and let him do his thing so that he was free to fulfill prophecies. Elida has a different opinion. We need to control him and monitor him and channel him to what he needs to do. And she seems to think if they don't do that, he won't fulfill the prophecies. But if it's prophecy, it's going to happen. Isn't that how prophecy works? Yeah, I just don't think she gets it. Finally, Elida then makes her point to the women that nothing else they've talked about here today holds a candle to the importance of getting Randalthor into their possession. That's job one. Get on it, women, and I want results. Now go! And she dismisses them. They all leave when dismissed, except Alviarin, kind of flexing her power that she's the keeper. She doesn't get just dismissed like the others. And here we learn a little bit more about why Alviarin, a white sister, was tapped for this job instead of a red, as would have traditionally been done. Politics. When Elida was making her move and she had the support of the reds behind her, the whites waffled. Now, Alviarin was one of the first that Elida had shared her suspicions with. And Alviarin supported her. But she made it clear, I'm not sure my Aja as a whole will back your play. So in order to get that concession, Elida promised Alviarin, well, I will make you keeper of the Chronicles. And then Alviarin was like, well, I can sell that for you. And the whites came along in full force with her. Without the full support of the white Aja, they may not have been able to rally enough support from the rest to make the move. And Elida could have been the one who was still executed when the coup attempt failed. Alviarin knows this. Elida needed them. You owe me. And thus, she's less likely to be cowed than the sisters of the other Ajas. She acts from a position of power. Now, at this point, knock, 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 an accepted comes up to say, Mr. or Master Padden Fane would like to speak with the Amerlincy. Padden Fane? When we last saw him in the Shadow Rising, back in the Two Rivers, after everything he was working on there fell apart, he was headed to the White Tower. So here we are in this book, right in the prologue, he's at the White Tower. And we learn here this is not his first meeting with the Amerlin. He's been here for a few days now. He's met with her multiple times. And Elida, this is her point of view that we're getting here. She doesn't think much of Fane. He's a bit of a whack job. She knows it. He changes accents, acts all arrogant and then all humble, and it's weird. Everybody can see it's weird. And yet she senses there's something she could use him for. She can get something she believes will be helpful, useful out of Padden Fane. But she doesn't want Alviarin in on it. So, come on in, Padden Fane. He comes in. Alviarin, you may leave now. Emphasis on now. She is dismissing her directly. Alviarin, in the presence of Padden Fane, doesn't make a stink, walks on out. We get a note then, because it switches over to Padden Fane. As Alviarin sweeps past her, he does not like her much. I mean, he's got an opinion of Elida that is not very positive, and Padden Fane, of course, is the best person in the entire world in the eyes of Padden Fane. We've only had a few point of views of Padden Fane been in his mind. It's icky every time, but we've seen the way he looks at things, and he is superior to everyone else. And very twisted in the way he looks at things. When he looks at Elida, he's like, well, this is not who I expected to find running Tar Valon. But I can work with it. He believes that she could potentially be more easily manipulated than her predecessor. He says potentially wise words here in comparison to Swan Sanche. I'll direct quote about Elida. Harder, yes, and more cruel, but more brittle too. More difficult to bend, likely, but easier to break. Okay, these are not the average thoughts a man is going to have about the Amerlin seat. Padan Fain is not your typical man. As Alviarin goes past him, though, he has a different thought. He's just glad she's leaving. Because when he's around her, he gets this feeling that she knows more about him than she should. He doesn't know why he feels that way. It's creeping him out, and he's just glad to have her gone. Spoiler light. Remember that. All right, Fane, seeing Alviarin leave, gets lost in his thoughts for a moment. And through those thoughts, and this goes fast. I mean, you can think about a lot of things just like this, but when you write it out, it takes a little longer. He's thinking about why he's here in the White Tower. There's a couple of key things here that he wants. He'd love to get his hands on. One is the Horn of Valir. Fane knows the Horn of Valir is here. Nearly no one knows. I don't think Elida knows the Horn of Valir is here. We know Swan knew, and Moraine, and Varen Sedai. I think that's the only Aes Sedai that we knew it was here, and Varen herself had intentionally hidden it somewhere down in the depths of the White Tower. A few of our core characters know this is where it was stored because they brought it. Like Egwene would know it's here somewhere. But Elida has no reason to know it's here. But Padan Fain does. He also knows his dagger is here. That's right, his dagger. The one that was taken from him. He lost it back there in Falme. And he needs it back. This is probably the more compelling thing that brought him to the White Tower. He can feel that dagger. He could point to where it's sitting, right through the walls. He could sense it. Because that dagger, it's part of himself, his Eridhall self. Okay, Padan Fain's not from Eridhall. This is reminding us that he spent time there in Eridhall, actually not called Eridhall anymore. Even in Padan Fain's thoughts, he's remembering, these days it's known as Shadar Logoth. When he was there, he had an encounter with Mashadar. Maybe. Or with Mordeth, which is one of the names he uses sometimes. A creature there. Remember, Rand, Perrin, Matt had an encounter with this being named Mordeth when they were there in Shadar Logoth. Well, somehow Padan Fain now is calling himself Mordeth. Mordeth had no shadow and disappeared when the boys discovered it, and then Mashadar attacked. Okay, some weird stuff happening. Somehow Padan Fain is tied to that, is what we're getting here, and so is the dagger. So he wants that back. He could go back to Eridhall, he thinks to himself, and get part of what he's lost, but he might end up trapped there again. Mordeth was trapped there. Padan Fain wasn't. Somehow something has happened, and that's what we're getting. More reminder of, more information of. So he doesn't want to go to Eridhall, Shadar Logoth. He wants his dagger. That's the easy path. Also, we get the reminder that Mordeth isn't the only name he's used. He was also Ordeith. That's his White Cloak hanging out name. So Padan Fain, Mordeth, Ordeith. Who the heck am I? That's something Padan Fain's not sure about anymore. He has changed from the peddler he once was. The one thing he is quite sure of is he is very powerful now. Now he turns to the conversation with Elida, realizing she asked him something and he has no idea what it was now. So maybe he should start paying attention. Why is Elida, the Amerlin seat, entertaining any time in conversation with Padan Fain? Well, there's a mutual usefulness between the two that we get here now. Because Padan Fane has acknowledged he knows Rand al'Thor. He knows the Dragon Reborn. He knew him as a boy in the Two Rivers. He's had interactions with him elsewhere around the continent, and he can give Elida information she desperately wants. Is it accurate? Not really. Some of it is true, some of it is twisted, because Padan Fane. It definitely is feeding into the concerns and fears that Elida has and amping up the need to get a hold of the Dragon Reborn and control him. Now, this plays into what Fane wants, because more than anything, he wants revenge on Rand al'Thor. He doesn't care about this Dragon Reborn garbage. He just blames Rand al'Thor for everything that was done to him. The way he was transformed and painfully has suffered this twisting of his soul and the things that were done to him up at Shia Ghul and just all the stuff he's been through. It's all Rand al'Thor's fault. If he could see Rand al'Thor suffer as badly as he personally has, he'd be in a happy place. And then he'd kill Rand. The interaction ends with a final twisted thought in Fane's head about Elida. Here's the quote. If she gave him al'Thor, he might leave her alive when he finally went, even if she was Aes Sedai. Again, these are the ways he's thinking about the Amarlin seat. This dude is no normal dude. Now, as prologues in the Wheel of Time are wont to do, we will jump to a new location for our next POV. This time to a room in the Caemlyn Palace in Andor, where we find the Forsaken Ravine dealing with a couple of people. Quick details we get. Ravine has identified the White Tower's spy, that Red Sister that we already heard about, because those who served the Chosen in the White Tower leaked her identity. Serve the Chosen? Those who's... Okay, we just hear right here, flat out confirmation. There are people in the White Tower serving the Forsaken. The Forsaken, of course, don't call themselves Forsaken. They call themselves the Chosen, because everyone is the hero of their own story. And they have people there on their side, right there in the heart of Aes Sedai power. What is he doing with this spy? Well, she's here in the room with him, along with a minor lord. These two are in his presence, and he's doing something. He's using compulsion directly right now in this Red Sister. And he's been doing it for some time, so the more he does it, the more pliable she becomes. So he's turned her basically into his spy puppet. She has no idea he's using her this way, but she's reporting back to Tar Valon only the things he wants them to know. Now, this other guy in the room, Lord Elegar, the only significance here to him is that Ravine is happy to use him because he's a friend of the dark. At least that's what they used to be called. These days, that's a dark friend. So one of the minor lords here at Andor is a confirmed dark friend who's been faithful to his oaths. The other little tidbit we get right here in Ravine's thoughts is that we can see him channeling, and it comments on he's able to touch the true source without being impacted by the taint, that poison on the source that the Dark One did in his stroke against the male Aes Sedai in the War of Power. He is protected from that by his ties to the Dark Lord. Unlike another male Forsaken that we met at the end of The Shadow Rising, Asmodean. We'll be talking about him again in just a little bit. At this point, a gateway opens up in the middle of this room and Lanfear appears. Gateway? I think this is our first actual reveal of a gateway. What is it? Well, somehow it's something done with the power where an opening appears and you can step directly from one place to another. because Ravine can see a totally different location where Lanfear is through this gateway. And after she steps through, the gateway closes. He can't see enough to know where she was, but it's not here. It's somewhere totally different. He's displeased that she arrived like this, unannounced. He's like, this is not how we do things. You could have sent a messenger in some matter to see if I was open to a visit. And she dismisses his complaints, doesn't give him the time of day. That's telling. This is Ravine, a Forsaken, but this is Lanfear, a Forsaken. Who's more powerful? It definitely suggests Lanfear is on top of Ravine, because he's not happy, she don't care, and doesn't even talk about it, and he does nothing else about that. He just lets it go. So, Lanfear, big boss. Ravine, somewhere a little lower. That's what we learned from this conversation. Now, why is she here? Well, she says, you've been avoiding the rest of us. Okay, we don't know why, other than perhaps he just wants to do his own thing. But she says, so a few of the chosen are coming here to meet with you. I mean, since you don't come to talk with us, we're coming to you. She acknowledges that she came first, as she did, so he'd know that he wasn't being attacked. And he acknowledges, yeah, that's not your style, frontal attacks. So you're right, I wouldn't assume you show up that you're here to attack me. What's all this about chosen attacking each other? Well, they might be on the same side as in the side of the Great Lord of the Dark, but they are not on each other's side. That's not how chosen work. That's not how the dark side works. Everyone is in it for themselves. So we're getting that emphasized here. If a chosen shows himself as weak, the other sharks will pounce. If they work cooperatively, it's because they believe it's in their own self-interest. They do not care about each other. So Lanfear's here. Ravine's like, fine. And in short order, two other Forsaken show up. Two more gateways. One is Samael, and the other is Grendel. We get a few details about these two. Now, Samael we'd heard about before. He's the Forsaken who's ruling in Ilion. We had that experience in The Dragon Reborn, where Moraine and Lan and Perrin and that group had gone through Ilion and had to flee when she discovered Samael is ruling here. Lord Brend was his alias. And they got out. We get to see Samael for the first time, though. He's described as compact, solid, larger seeming than he truly was, meaning this is not a tall man, but he's powerful of physique. He has an abrupt manner, and he would likely be seen better than average looking, except he's got a scar slanting from his hairline to his jaw down his face. And it's noted he could have had that scar removed right when it first happened, but for some reason, he chose to keep it. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Grendel, she's described as stunningly beautiful, lush, and ripe. So we get the impression she's curvy in a voluptuous way. But it's also said, in comparison to Lanfear, she's just prettily plump. Of course, Lanfear has long been described as the most beautiful woman in the world, so it's kind of hard to compare to her. This might be Grendel, then, is the most beautiful woman in the world, except that lady in silver over there. Ravine asks about, is this it? I mean, what about Demandred? Will he be joining us? Or does he still have that exceedingly high opinion of himself where he practically thinks he's the heir to the Dark Lord? And Lanfear's like, no. Demandred isn't quite that arrogant. After all, we all know what happened to Ishamael for thinking too highly of himself. And of course, that's a reference to Ishamael being killed at the end of The Dragon Reborn. He went up against Randall Thor 3 times. Eye of the World, The Great Hunt, The Dragon Reborn, and the third time he was out. And he didn't interact with the rest of them. He was better than the rest of them. And now he's gone and they're not. Demandred would not make the same mistake as what Lanfear is saying. Lanfear goes on to point out that only the four of them are going to be meeting today, and that's enough. We are all that's needed for what I have in mind. And it's important that we do meet and take action because, there used to be 13 of us chosen, immortal beings of power, and four of us are dead now, and one of us has betrayed the rest. Okay, so who's dead? Okay, so we've got a Shamael. Way back at the end of the Eye of the World, we saw uh, Bathamo and Agenor killed. And then we also know at the end of The Dragon Reborn, Balal was killed. So that's four who used to be around who are not now. Ravine questions whether or not Asmodean truly turned against them. So word has gotten out that Asmodean is now playing for Team Rand. Lanfear explains it brilliantly. Asmodean overreached on an ambush of the Dragon Reborn, making his move to become the chosen above all others if he could have this victory over Rand al'Thor, but his move fell short. And he was given the choice of death or joining a doomed cause and was quick to make his choice. He doesn't want to die. Now, this is a brilliant description because she's not actually lying. She's telling what happened. She's leaving out key details, namely her own involvement in it. Asmodean did not willingly join Rand al'Thor. Lanfear gave him no choice, setting him up to be killed by all the other chosen for the rumors she would spread. So, all right, I'll be with Rand, and she wants him with Rand to teach him. She's cut him off from most of his access to the power and left just a trickle enough to be able to demonstrate some things as he tutors Rand as to how to channel as a man. Now, Lanfear's question, okay, if you were close enough to see what happened between Asmodean and this Rand al'Thor, why didn't you kill Asmodean when he betrayed us? And she responds, I've always been a little slower to kill than some of you. Killing is so final. I like to keep my options open. You never know what you might be able to do with someone if they're still around, but once you kill them, that's done. Also, Rand al'Thor is kind of strong. I'd rather not risk going head to head with him. Again, we heard earlier when she first showed up, she has a reputation for avoiding frontal assaults. Now, is he truly so strong, this untrained shepherd boy? That's what some of the others are asking, Ravine in particular, and she responds, he may just be a shepherd boy, but he is also Luz Theron Telamon, reborn, who was as strong as any. Samael starts rubbing his scar. We learn here, yeah, he got that from Luz Theron in a battle over 3,000 years ago, and he kept it kind of as a reminder and perhaps would like to get a little payback at some point. Their discussion goes on to cover the following points. Rand really is Luz Theron Telamon reborn, but he's also just a shepherd, so he's still rather naive as to how powerful he is and what he could do and what he will need to do. Still, this untrained, naive man has managed to take out 4 of the chosen. Now, that's not entirely true. Balthamel was killed by the Green Man. Rand did take out Agenor, but he didn't even know what he was doing. Balal, okay, Rand was in an encounter with Balal, but it's actually Moraine who blindsided Balal with balefire that took him out. Is Shamael? Yeah, you can give that one to Rand. But it took 3 tries. Nevertheless, she points to Rand, setting him up as the reason 4 chosen are off the board. Samael, he's not worried about Rand taking out Chosen. He's like, hey, if there's less of us left when we get to Tarman Gaiden, more riches for the rest of us. Grendel, she speaks up. A little surprised Lanfear hasn't already tried to get into Rand's bed. I mean, you kind of had that obsession with Luce Theron. Everybody here remembers it. Now he's reborn. Why aren't you hitting that? Well, she maybe has tried. Just hasn't gone like she wants. So she's working up to it, shall we say. But she doesn't bring that up. She just, blows that off. Lanfear doesn't question that the Great Lord will defeat the Dragon Reborn, whether Asmodean is at his side or not. But she says what our real concern is, despite how dismissive Samael is, how many of us are still going to be around when we get to Tarman Gaiden, when the Dark Lord, our Great Lord, finally wins. After all, she reminds them all, none of us actually won ever in a direct confrontation with Luce Theron during the War of Power. So now she's kind of prepped it, that he's something they need to worry about, and they shouldn't go right at him. They need to find a way to scheme around him. And Lanfear lays out her plan. The four of them will succeed where Ashameo failed. They will bring Rand over to the dark and present him to the Great Lord. That's her plan. Ashameo tried to control him, tried to force him to do what he wanted him to do, and that did not work. She's choosing just these three to work with her because she's saying there are others out there that I don't think would go along with this. And in fact, one or two of them that I think are already actively involved, trying to control Rand al'Thor. Maybe trying to kill him. She suspects Demandred or Moghedien may be out there doing things in the background, actively fighting against Rand. How does she know this? And how does she have these suspicions? She doesn't tell them. She just says, I have my ways. I am close to Rand. I am able to keep my eye on him. How's that? Well, we do have confirmation at the end of the Shadow Rising that she is somebody in the group of people that's with Rand. He doesn't know who, and she didn't acknowledge which one, but she's in disguise amongst the people with him. So she's seen the attempts at his life, things that have been done to try to grab him, various shadow spawn attacks and stuff. She's witnessed it, and she's referencing these things. She says what we need to do is instead be more subtle. Subtle brothers and sisters, nuancing him in to the fold. The chapter ends with Ravine listening to this plan and thinking to himself, she might be onto something. This could work. But if not, he also sees ways he could then shape events to swing his way. And that's the end of the prologue. Now we move on to chapter 1. Now again, the prologue had a name, The First Sparks Fall. Remember the book, The Fires of Heavens. These kind of have some neat tie-ins. Now we go from The First Sparks Fall to chapter 1, Fanning the Sparks. I'm liking these connections. The chapter begins by locating us on the northern edge of Andor, in the midst of a dry, hot summer, seemingly drier than usual, perhaps even a drought. We've got a wind blowing us along, just like happens in every chapter 1 of these books. And the wind leads our attention to Min, Swan Sanche, and Lyanna. They're locked up in a horse barn awaiting judgment for apparently accidentally burning down another barn with the milk cows inside. Don't hurt the cows, ladies. Okay, we should back up a bit. We'd last seen this group when they escaped from Tar Valon, along with Logain Ablar, the gentle false dragon. They've spent the last few weeks wandering around the countryside, Swan leading them in search of something. We're in Min's POV for this chapter, and she doesn't know what Swan has been searching for. So she's kind of tired and frustrated of what seems like aimless wandering. But no, there's an aim. Swan's just not telling. Not having much anything in the way of funds, they've been making do as they've wandered as inexpensively as possible. And that's what got them into trouble here, because they decided to bed down in somebody's barn on the outskirts of the small village of Core Springs. Asleep in that barn, uninvited, the farmer and some of his kin had come in before dawn to kind of start up doing things for the day and came upon them. And there's surprise and shock, and Logain dashes off out of the barn rather than be caught. Unfortunately, he knocked the farmer down when he did that, when he pushed out of the way, and the farmer's lantern, because it was dark before dawn, he's got a lantern, it falls down on some of the straw nearby. Remember, drought, straw, whoosh, goes up. It's next to the barn, whoosh, goes up. The cows are in the barn, whoosh. Espresso. Anyways, Logain gets away. The women are all caught by the people on the farm, and they're being held with justice demanded as they wait now locked up in this barn, not the one that burned down, a barn more in town, right across from the village inn. Min wonders what the punishment will be. I mean, what would they do to someone who burns down a barn? I mean, it was an accident. The farmer and the family, they'd been mad and they wanted, string them up, just a hanging. We need a hanging. But Swan assures Min that no. Andor has the rule of law. More likely, we're going to get a public strapping. At worst, a flogging. Strapping is painful. Flogging damages the skin. There's your difference. Neither of those seem too pleasant to Min. Now, some details. The four of them had been going under assumed names. So Min has a second assumed name now. I mean, she'd been going under the name Elbindreda. Now, actually, that is her name, but she never uses it. She's just Min. But now, Swan gave her the name Serenla. Min's having trouble keeping all the fake names straight, and that comes up in these interactions a little bit, because they all have fake names. As they're sitting here in conversation and waiting to see what's going to happen to them, why are they locked up here? Well, the people of Core Springs called for their local lord, the person who oversees this area of Andor, and he's on his way to oversee a trial and pronounce judgment. So they've got time to kick their heels back and wait. They were allowed to keep their possessions, their travel bags. They had horses, but the horses are gone too. When whatever happened at the barn, the horses are not there anymore. But their bags are, so as they're waiting there, Min observes Lyanna using her time, doing things a little unusual. Something she's not seen Lyanna do before. That is, digging into her bag, she's brought out basically a makeup kit. And she is taking the time to thoroughly gussy herself up. She's beautifying herself. And Min's like, Lyanna, what are you doing? You think you're going to flirt your way out of this situation? And Lyanna looks at her and point blank says, yes. And explains. She's nationally a Domani. The Domani are known for their beauty, but also their willingness to use that beauty to get more of what they want. Many of the Domani women are merchants, for example, as Lyanna's mother was, as her aunt was, and they intentionally use their feminine charm, beauty, and wiles to get better deals for their business. They will make promises, suggestions. Promises is the wrong word. Suggestions and hints at the favors that might be, the positive to come to a man who is willing to give them a better price. Leanna talks about this, and she ends up blurting out that she's decided to revert now and bring back some of these things she learned as a child and as a young teen before she became Aes Sedai, because she can't channel anymore. She's not Aes Sedai anymore, and she needs something to give her power. She doesn't have access to the power. This might be something else she can do, something to give herself purpose again, so that she'll feel the drive to keep living. If she can start using this natural beauty as a power over men, once again, she has something she can do to make her way in the world. Getting ready to turn her womanly charms up to 11, Liana admits she's actually horribly out of practice with this. I mean, she's been an Aes Sedai for many years. She hasn't needed this. So it's not like, okay, we're locked up in a barn. I'm suddenly thinking I should get pretty and try to use it. She admits, I've been thinking about this for days, actually. I even thought to maybe practice on Logain, see if I could charm him a bit. And then I decided that might be a bad idea, because Logain is more the kind of guy that she senses would potentially hear more being promised than what she was hinting or offering, and then expect that promise to be fulfilled. Min is shocked to hear Liana talk bluntly about her mother's perspective on that when she was teaching her as a young girl, saying, if you ever got in too deep like that with a man, you have two choices. Either let go of your self-respect and run for it, or pay the price and consider it a lesson. Pay the price, meaning you suggested things to a man and now the man wants those. Let it happen. Ew. And that's what Min's thinking. Ew. But she's even more shocked when Liana keeps going and says, of course, then my aunt, she said, yeah, sometimes you got to pay the price and enjoy it. Okay. That's a different perspective on life for sure. Swan challenges Liana here. Okay, what if this local lord is more like Logain? Are you going to carry through in making offers that then you have to keep? And Liana, she's like, yeah. Basically saying, I guess I'd take one for the team. Conversation on this comes to an end then as they hear the chains on the door being jiggled and the door is opened. And they learn the Lord is here and they're being escorted before him for judgment. Who's him? A guy named Lord Gareth. They are taken into the common room of the village inn, notably named the Good Queen's Justice, and there's a crowd of townspeople all around the outskirts of the room. Big common room. The center's been cleared out. There's a space for the women to then stand. And at the front of the room, in front of the fireplace, there's a table. It's the only table that's been given a space still. And at that table is a man, which they can discern must be the Lord, this Lord Gareth, because he's been given a place of honor to listen and judge. It comes as a surprise to them all when the judgment session begins and the Lord's full title is announced, Lord Gareth Bryn. Min remembers that name. We remember that name. We last saw Gareth Bryn as the Captain General of the Queen's Guard in Camelin. What in the world is he doing here? We'll learn a little bit more about that to come. The trial takes place. And while those who lost their barn and animals make their case with much bluster and exaggeration, you can sense Gareth Bryn is looking at it and going, yeah, Okay, he's not believing quite everything is as bad as they're trying to portray. Then he turns to the women, and what do you have to say? And Liana steps right up to speak for the women. And she pours on the charm and the beauty and all the nuance and flutteriness and full Domani, while Swan just stands there with her face down, eyes glued to the floor. What's going on with Swan? She recognizes Gareth Bryn, of course. She had interactions with him as the Amerlin, and she does not want him recognizing her. Liana clearly makes an impact on Gareth Bryn. You can see him almost kind of squirming because, whoa, she's just oozing charisma and charm. But she also makes their case, pinning everything that happened pretty much on Dalin. Now, that was Loghain's alias. Painting them mostly as just helpless, innocent women who fell in with this man who could protect them, but then he was a bad man. And we couldn't stop him because he's the powerful man and we're just innocent women, yada, yada, yada. After hearing her say her bit, then he asks Min, for a little bit, and she kind of just, yeah, that, like she said. And then Swan, and Swan doesn't give any extra information. Gareth actually has to come up and take her by the chin to lift her head up. She won't even look at him. When she is forced to look at him, Min's like, oh, crap, because she glares at him, full Amerlin. That stare of defiance. And all she will do is give her name. Of course, it's her false name, Mara. Okay, Bryn decides to give judgment. He's heard everything, and he decides to find in favor of the plaintiffs. Yes, they did harm to you, and you have a right to damages. And he decides what amount is appropriate, not nearly as much as they wanted, but he's the Lord, and he's clear, this is what you're going to get. They're like, thank you, my Lord. They're not thrilled, but they know arguing will get them nothing more. Then he turns to the women. He says, I can assume you don't have that kind of money. So here's what's going to happen. I will pay on your behalf. Then you will come work for me to pay off the debt. And then he gives them a couple options. He says, you can work out in the fields. We've got crops that need harvesting and care. Or you can work in the manor house. Now, the manor house, you'll actually make more money. You're going to make the same amount that the people who work for me make. So you're coming into my employ, but you're not going to get any of the money. The money will come to me. Basically, I'll credit that amount against your debt, and you'll work for me until the debt is paid off. You can choose to work in the manor house, but I will not allow that unless you swear an oath to me that convinces me we won't have to keep an eye on you. We're not going to have to guard you. If I got to guard you, you're going to be out there where there are overseers in the fields who kind of supervise the job, and they'll keep an eye on you. But if I can trust you to be faithful, to stay and do the work, then you could work in the manor house and honestly work this off faster. And this is going to be working for a while because it's quite a sum of money, actually, that they're going to have to make up. Now, okay, swear an oath. Min and Liana, they're like sitting there then racking their brains. What's the weakest oath we could swear that will be good enough? When Swan just drops to her knees and offers the mother of all oaths. The one that pretty much damns you to the depths if you break it. Flabbergasted, Liana and Min kind of don't have a choice now, and they get on their knees and say the same oath. This is a rock solid oath. And Bryn is taken aback. He's like, okay, that was overkill. Not really what I expected, but it'll do. Yep, okay. He says we don't have to guard them anymore. They have sworn, and we can trust that they will stick to this. No one breaks this oath. The trial's over. Bryn then and the women have a little small chat, and then he explains, I'm going to have one of my men take you back to the manor, and you can get to work. And it will not be a bad place for you. We care for people. And Johnny, the man who's taking them, he also says the same thing. This won't be so bad. Uh, Lord Bryn is a fair person to serve. He gets them up in the bed of his wagon, and off they go. Bryn and the rest of his entourage, they're going to be here in the town just a little bit longer, kind of settling things, taking care of business, and then they'll follow. Riding along in the wagon now, the wagons are kind of noisy, so they can talk to each other without the Joni overhearing. It becomes very clear to Min quite quickly that they're going to break this oath. Because she's like, how could you, she's saying to Swan, how could you have us swear that oath? And she's like, it was the best way I could be sure that Gareth Bryn wouldn't have people keeping their eyes on us at all times, because we're getting out of here. And Min's shocked. We're going to break that oath? We can't break that oath. And this is great. This is classic Aes Sedai, actually, where Swan says, we're not really going to break the oath, okay? Because we have a more important job to do. We have to find what I'm looking for. We need to deal with the business at hand. When I swore to serve Gareth Bryn and pay off this debt, I very intentionally did not say I would do it immediately. I will do it. I promise. I will do it. I will pay off this debt when I have time. And she's like, yeah, I know when we disappear, he's probably not going to appreciate it. He's going to see it as I broke the debt, broke this oath and skipped town on the debt, but that's not true. I will get around to it when I have time. Min is like, holy crap. Wow. Talking about cutting hairs. Well, they don't have much time to talk about it any further because Johnny, I don't know, Joni. I forget how the audiobooks pronounces that one. It's probably Johnny, I suppose, spelt in a weird way. Anyways, he suddenly falls off the wagon. No, it doesn't mean he got drunk after not drinking for years. He falls off the wagon. The wagon is still being pulled by the horse, and oh, there's our guy. And they get off the wagon, they stop the horse, they go to check on him. He's unconscious. He's got a bump on his head. What the heck? Well, it's Logain. Ta-da! Logain shows up with their horses, and he took the guy out with a slingshot. The guy's going to be fine, but he's got an egg on his head now where Logain just knocked him out with a shot. And he points out, I was never far away. You look surprised to see me, and I'm hurt by that. Disappointed, Swan. You made a promise to me that I can have revenge against the Reds for how they manipulated me, how they used me. I'm going to keep you to that. So all I had done was got away so that I could get you away. You should have had more faith. But, this is one more thing he adds now, I am losing patience. We're going all over Tarnation looking for whatever you're looking for, and you won't tell us. I'm not going to wait forever. You need to find this, whatever it is, and be done with it. Or you need to stop looking and let's move on with the revenge you promised. Because I'm not going to wait forever. I could just head off on my own, seek my own revenge, and let's see how well you three ladies, all on your own with no money, do. You need me. So let's get busy. Well, Min's like, whoa, a little bit of the old arrogant Logain showing up here again. Not so much that beaten puppy anymore. Swan, though, she calls his bluff. She's like, hey, if you want to be gone, go. We don't need you. We'll figure it out. Let's see how your desire for revenge does without us. And she kind of has a point. So Logain says, fine. I will stay a little longer. He's still not totally backing down. But when he commits to stay with them, Min sees a vision over him. Remember, she sees these prophetic visions. And when she sees things, she often knows exactly what they mean. This thing she sees around Logain is like a halo of glory. And she's seen it before back in Tarvalon. And it makes no sense because it means, and she knows these things always come true, it means he has glory ahead of him. How the heck is he going to have glory? He's a former disgraced false dragon who's been gentled. He has no access to the power. How in the world does that turn to become a man who is being glorified by others as a leader of men? What? She cannot figure out what his future is going to be. With this, it's time for them to get going. They get on the horses that Logain had saved and brought for them, which means this is a sighting again of Bella, Rand's horse Bella from the Two Rivers, who Egwene rode out and then was in Tarvalon, and they took Bella when they left, and Swan was riding her, so Swan is back on Bella. Mild, well-tempered Bella that Swan is riding like a bucking wild war horse, because she's a horrible rider. As they ride off, Min wonders if Gareth Bryn will come after them. And Logain answers, I doubt it. You all aren't important enough for him to really chase you down. He might send a man after you to see where in the world you go, but you have nothing really to worry about. Now we jump back to Gareth Bryn, back in the village, a little bit later. They've learned what happened. Johnny came back, explained they got away, and he's preparing to head out with his men to track them down and bring them back. Turns out Bryn has taken a specific interest in these women, an interest he doesn't entirely understand. By typical precedent, his judgment on their trial should have been that they had to work for the farmer and his family until they paid off their debt to him. Bryn knew these folks, though. They're not great people. I mean, they might be his people, but they're not great people. He's like, it wouldn't be long before the men folk are trying to corner the women for favors, and the women folk are taking it out on these girls for being pretty. It's like, I'm not putting them in that situation. So I stepped in, I paid their debt, and they come work for me. So that alone's a little unusual, but now the fact that they swore such strong oaths and ditched it anyways, that's got him really puzzled. In particular, that one woman, that Mara, who stared at him with such strength and defiance and was the first to swear this strong oath, she's wiggled her way into his brain. He wants to know what must have been so important that she was willing to break that oath. He wants to know that answer. So Bryn and 20 of his men, all grizzled older veterans like himself, have begun following the trail of the runaways. They are going to chase them down and bring them back. They haven't gone very far when they're joined by another of the local older veterans who see them going by and rides on up. And from this guy, we get a little conversation back and forth because he's assuming Bryn has decided, like, he's been called back to Camelin because of the things that are happening in the world, and he's going to retake his position as Captain General. And Bryn's like, no, very strongly, I'm not doing that. Okay, a little touchiness there. And this is where we get to remember and acknowledge why Bryn is out here. We learned in the last book, Bryn had been dismissed from Camelin because when Lord Gabriel had showed up and Morghese is listening and doing more and more of what Lord Gabriel wants, it didn't make sense. It wasn't how Queen Morghese has acted, and Gareth Bryn spoke up. He wasn't comfortable with this. Something's wrong. And when he spoke up, Morghese took it as opposition to her authority, and she dismissed him. She fired him. Basically, she retired him. You're clearly too old for the duties involved, and sent him off his way back to his manor. He was hurt by that, and he's a little bitter. That's why he's out here, and that's why he certainly is not going back to report to Camelin. But what do we learn from this man who came up and had a little news of the world? Gareth Bryn learns things we already know, of course, but learns them in rumors that may or may not be accurate. First of all, the Stone of Tyr has fallen to Aiel, and Kalendor has been drawn. Bryn knows that proclaims the presence of the real Dragon Reborn. Also, Elida now is the Amerlin seat. Elida, who used to be an advisor in Camelin. The former Amerlin seat, Swan Sanche, stilled and executed. That's what everyone's saying. Also, the former false dragon Logain, who was kept in Tarvalon, he also died. Yeah, rumors are grand. But Bryn's mind, as he hears all these changes, it's quickly going to all the political and military ramifications. He spent all these years close to Queen Morghese, right there in the seat of power in Camelin, and he can't help think about what does this mean and what should we do and what would I be doing right now? And then he's like, stop it, you foolish old man. That is not my place anymore. I do not have to make those decisions. I do not have to worry about Andor. I can worry about chasing down Mara. That's enough for me. I'm retired. I get to pick my fun. With that, we switch again, actually over to the Royal Palace of Andor, back in Camelin, and we see the arrival of the High Lady Altima. Now, we've met High Lady Altima. She's actually rather notorious. We met her early in The Shadow Rising. I'm wondering how many of you first-time readers remembered this right away. Altima is a High Lady of Tyr. She was the one who poisoned her husband and then was caring for him while he's basically a convalescent now because of the poison, and she's making sure he's never going to be well again. With information Rand got from Tom, he chose to outmaneuver her and sent her along with other lords and ladies of Tyr to the delegation to Cairhien to provide relief in the midst of this civil war. And he also had her husband cared for by his lover. Altima had poisoned him because she learned about the lover. It's a mess. Altima is not on Team Rand, not happy with the mission, and she's not in Cairhien. She's gone her own way. Here she is showing up at the court of Queen Morghese in Andor, hoping to accomplish something to get back some power, to maybe get a friend against this Rand al'Thor, this upstart, who's doesn't know what he's doing and is flexing power in ways he shouldn't and has no respect for the nobility. That's what's in her mind. That's the attitude. She is led into a meeting with Queen Morghese. Now, she's met Morghese in the past. She remembers this very prim, proper, reserved, regal figure. Guardsman Lieutenant Talonvor escorts her in. Now, we've met Talonvor a few times before. Kind of a tertiary or quaternary, I think I made that word up, character. He was one of the ones that dealt with Rand in the garden, also dealt with Matt in the garden. He's been around the court. And he's the one that escorts Altima to Queen Morghese, and we get to see through Altima's eyes the way Queen Morghese has changed. And she's shocked. Because the first thing she sees is, okay, this is still the queen, clearly a powerful woman, but she's dressed like a tavern, I don't know, a tavern maid, a harlot. I mean, she's dressed scandalously. Now, it's very fine attire, but her breasts are practically falling out. There's cuts up the side of her dress that's revealing amazing amount of leg. This is not how a queen dresses, which tells her something very quickly. She had heard rumors about Queen Margase having a lover, this Lord Gabriel. If she's dressing like this, she is focused not just on ruling Andor, she's focused on pleasing this man. Because no woman's going to dress like this, in Altima's mind, is going to dress like this just because she wants to. She's dressing like this because she thinks this is what Lord Gabriel likes. She's the queen. Shouldn't Lord Gabriel be concerned more about what Margase likes? But she's seeing something very different here, and she thinks this is very un-Margase. But the two women settle down. Margase welcomes her here, and they have conversation. The typical kinds of stuff high ladies of neighboring realms would chat about. It helps us to see what Margase knows and didn't yet know about the events in Tyr. The conversation continues fairly cordially, a little guarded. Altima's certainly not sharing anything that she's done wrong. Everything is shared in a way that makes her look better than otherwise. And this goes on until Lord Gabriel walks in saying, "You didn't tell me you had a guest." And immediately everything changes. First of all, Margase is practically making gaga eyes, clearly thrilled to see Gabriel back in her presence. Also, the fact of how he just barged in with self-assured confidence, puts an arm on the bare shoulder of Margase, very clearly in command. A man of power who does not answer to the queen. It's like, whoa, this is not what I expected here. And this is flexed a little bit because as Altima's watching this, she sees Gabriel pretty much just dismiss Margase from the room. Basically saying, "Oh dear, you look tired. Clearly you need some rest. Why don't you go lie down?" And off Margase goes. The Queen of Andor just dismissed. And now Gabriel gets down to questioning Altima. "Why are you here? What do you know of the events of Tyr? Tell me about this Randall Thor." And she spills everything. Now, this is a clear contrast to the conversation she just had with Margase, where she was guarded. And again, everything was painted in a way that made her look good. With Gabriel, she starts out with, "Yeah, I poisoned my husband." And doesn't seem to have it. I mean, she's like, "Ooh, maybe I shouldn't have said that," but just keeps going. No real hesitancy. She just bears her soul to this Lord Gabriel. And she finds herself desperately wanting to please this man. And as the section ends, she's even thinking of how much better she could please him than Margase. Do you see what's happening here? Okay, we've already had the information in the past that this Lord Gabriel is Ravine. He's a Forsaken. He clearly was using compulsion earlier, and that's the only thing that can be happening here. He just used gentle compulsion on Altima. She has no idea what's happening, but he makes her just spill the beans and be thrilled to do it. Must be what's going on with Margase too, because wow, she just hopped to it when he makes a suggestion, "You should go lie down." She's going to go lie down. The queen doesn't do that. But if you're being compelled by a Forsaken, yes, you do. The final 3 paragraphs of this section, of this chapter, reinforces that. So if you hadn't caught on, you catch a little more because it jumps to Margase. She's in her room. Her servants have just turned down the bed and have left, and Margase is climbing in, not even taking her dress off. And as she climbs into bed, she's feeling some mental conflict. She's like, "Of course I'm getting into bed. Gabriel told me I was tired." Wait, I told him I was tired. No, he said I was tired. She can't keep it straight of why she's even here going to bed. Of course, we know he told her, "You should go lie down." So, of course, she's lying down. But she's thinking, "I'm the queen. No one tells me to do anything. But I'm being stubborn. I am tired." This back and forth is going on in her mind. She also thinks about this is just silly to think that anyone would tell me what to do. I mean, remember, I had a Captain General, Gareth Bryn. He obeyed me. I speak, he follows orders. I kind of miss him. Then she's like, but I don't miss him. He disobeyed me. He opposed me, and so I dismissed him. I think. And she's like, I can't really remember actually what he did that was so wrong. And as she drifts off to sleep, which happens pretty quickly actually, she's troubled by dreams where she's running away from something that she can't see. An astute reader could pick something up here, and I don't think this is spoiler, because I'd want you to draw this connection. Back in the prologue, when the Forsaken, the Chosen, had met, Ravine makes a reference to using compulsion on people. This was in his own mind, and that there was one that he was compelling who was resisting it. And that just happens sometimes. Some people seem to have a more natural resistance to compulsion, where they'll even be pushing back and fighting and looking for cracks and ways past it without even knowing it. It's like a subconscious thing. And there's one in particular that's doing that right now, but he still needs her. So he'll manage it and he'll navigate it, and hopefully soon enough he won't need her anymore. But we know who's fighting it. Morgase's mind is in chaos. She knows something's wrong, and yet she's got this constant compulsion on her that nothing's wrong, and she should stop being stubborn, quit resisting, take the easy course. How's it going to play out for Morgase moving forward? Ravine's thinking maybe I need to be done with her. You'll have to keep reading to find out and come back to these episodes. That's it. That's the end of this chapter and the end of this episode. Because I don't have Zach with me here today, I'm not going to do a spoiler zone. I just, that's fun to talk with him, some full spoilers. I'm not gonna. So nobody has to jump out early today. This is where we're going to end it. And I'm just going to run my credits where, let's see, let me get this going. There they are. Where this reminds you of all the ways you can connect with us. Now, if you're listening on an audio podcast, of course, you can't see these. So I will point out, again, a request to like the episode, give us a rating if you're listening on the audio, 5 stars. Awesome. Thank you. And you can always give some feedback. And then find ways to connect with us: Discord, Twitter, Mastodon, Facebook, Instagram. Next level, if you'd like to support us to keep this going, Patreon. Look for Fantasy for the Ages at Patreon, and we'd love your support. Thank you, everyone. Hope to have Zach with me next time. Pretty sure I will. And I hope to have you too. We'll talk to you next time.